Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, aka the High Heeled Gamer, and welcome to another episode of the Late Night Nerd Show. Today I'm super excited to have with me Jeff Zanelotti. I hope I said that right, from Zed Comics. Jeff, welcome aboard. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I love the show.
Good, good, good. I'm so glad. See that people do watch. So Jeff, I'm super excited because you're part of my family per se. You're a retired military
Mhm.
vet. So thank you for your
Oh,
service.
thank you.
A lot of people know that my husband's also retired as well. So
Right.
it's a community near and dear to our hearts. But you also have a comic coming out.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, let's start off by you telling us a little bit about the comic, okay?
Okay. Well, the comic book is called Accidental Renegades. It's 36 pages. It's a manga inspired comic book that essentially follows the adventures of a bumbling team of super mercenaries who unintentionally ignite a global revolution. And it asks the question, how do you stay out of the public eye when you become the most unwittingly notorious people on the planet? It's a crowdfunded book. It launched on Kickstarter actually this morning, and right now it's doing pretty well. So looking forward to the momentum continuing and seeing that book get funded, be able to get in the hands of backers, and hopefully get as many people as possible, preaching the gospel of Accidental Renegades.
That's exciting. So is
Yeah.
this your first Kickstarter?
The first Kickstarter, yeah, second comic book, first Kickstarter. I did a comic book previously in conjunction with the Free Comic Book Day in 2021. And that was kind of self-funded. It was just something I wanted to do myself. It was a small individual run to get out in some local comic book shops here near home. Really, more than anything, I wanted to be able to prove that I could do it. And once I realized that I was able to do it, and once it was well received, I realized I had more stories to tell and wanted to continue telling them.
How exciting. So how did you come about like this band of misfits, almost like the Bad News Bears kind of superheroes?
Well, that's a good question. Really, I feel like there are really two different types, at least from a comic book perspective, two different types of books, right? You have your individual books, your Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Daredevil, and then you have your team books. And I've always personally gravitated more towards the team book. I don't know if it's just what I was reading when I was younger, and so that kind of inspired me more. But what I found in kind of working in both arenas is that working on team books allow you to tell a more diverse story with different points of view. If you have a main character, the story kind of gravitates towards that main character's personality. But if you have a team, each one can kind of embody a different, ethos that you want to show in the story. So by picking a team of kind of like bumbling, like you said, bad news bears, they're not great at what they do, but they try real hard. They have a lot of potential, but not a lot of skill. That story to me is interesting because it shows the fallibility of people. I've never really enjoyed stories where the characters are perfect. I like characters that try and fail and in some cases won't ever succeed despite their best intentions, because I feel like it's realistic and it's something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, it's definitely human nature because like
Yeah.
we're never perfect, and we always like, for me at least, when I read a comic, I tend to like and favor the characters that are somewhat like me. They're
Hmm.
never ever fully like me, but they're somewhat
Right.
like me. So I do like the fact that they're perfectly imperfect, if
Right.
you will. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. So you grew up reading comics. Did you read mangas as well, since you said that this comic book is manga inspired?
So yes, I grew up reading. I mean, a child of the 80s and 90s. I grew up reading comic books. In that time, I personally just happened to read a lot of Marvel. So the X-Men, um, shaped a lot of my comic personality, I guess. Only in probably the past 5 or so years that I really get into manga, and I feel like there was a lot of catching up to do. It's a totally different way of looking at a very um, a very popular way of telling stories. Western comics and manga, as I'm sure you and many of your listeners know, tell stories similarly but not the same. And manga has a cultural and a kind of more of a zeitgeist that's different from what you get in Western comics. And I really kind of enjoy that. And so what I did with The Troublemakers, which was my first book, and Accidental Renegades, which is the current one, is try to incorporate a lot of manga inspired flavor without making it a manga. I wasn't looking to co-opt the genre, but I was looking to kind of merge the two together. And so it has a lot of the energy, it has a lot of the humor that you would typically find in a shonen manga, but it also is a Western comic in the way that it reads and the way the characters look. They're not 100% manga designed, but they are definitely manga inspired.
Okay. So you like the flair of manga versus, well, not versus, but it for you the flair of a manga, it just feels better for you.
Yeah, and I think so now. I mean, I've been reading comics for a while, and like with anything else, I think when you do it for a while, you tend to start to look outside of what you're comfortable with.
Mhm.
Um, I enjoy a lot of comic book artists that might be considered not necessarily house style. People like Umberto Ramos, Chris Bachalo, Joe Madureira. Um, I'm sure there are others that I'm just blank on right now, but people who have a very unique style that isn't always well received.
Mhm.
But I love that because it's not what everyone else looks like. Manga, in so many ways, even though it has a style, looks unlike anything else on the shelves in many cases. And I don't like all of it. I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, do you read that book?" I'm like, I can't stand the art. But I read other books and I'm like, I can't get enough of this. This is gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
It's like nothing I've ever seen. So, like anything else, it's subjective. But I do find that manga, because it can be so unique and so diverse, that it's interesting just in the fact that it's willing to take chances that a lot of comics. I mean, there are Western comics that are taking these chances, but they're not necessarily as received to the same level as manga. And I think that gives their artists freedom to do things that Western comics are still catching up with a little bit.
I do like that you've taken this approach kind of outside the box, you know what I mean? It's not the traditional, form of it all. So it's definitely something, different, and I'm all about the different. Like, you kinda get tired of the
Yeah,
same old
yeah,
stuff, so I'm always all about the difference, and, my viewers know that when they come to the show, they know that it's not gonna be the same thing twice unless it's the
right,
same guest twice, like,
right, exactly. And even then, it's going to be different. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I do appreciate that. Did you do the artwork as well?
Yeah, so I do everything. I write it, I script it, I do the art, I do the lettering,
Oh,
with the
wow,
exception
one-man show, huh?
of printing. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for doing it that way, but obviously it comes with a lot of challenges. Um, it allows me to, I think, to work a little bit more efficiently in that I'm able to do a lot of things in shorthand because I already kind of know where I want to go when I'm scripting a page. I'll, know, okay, two long panels and an open panel at the bottom. I'll put those notes in for myself because I'm kind of envisioning it as I'm writing. I think a lot of comic book writers do that, but in this case, I'm the artist as well, so I don't need to interpret anything. I've already kind of know where I'm going. The downside is it makes it sometimes harder to see if you're going in the wrong direction because you don't have a second set of eyes on it. So I always have to be very cognizant to really look critically at what I'm doing. And I kind of found that with the first book. I felt like there was a couple of spots where I could have gone a different direction. It would have made the story stronger, but I just, for whatever reason, did not see those. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of doing things a little bit different now and working with a couple other people as like beta readers to have them look at the book before it goes final and offer some really good insight that I may not see. Hopefully that will eliminate some of the problems. But there's a certain luxury in being able to sit down and just do it, not
Mhm.
having to wait on anyone else or having those discussions. But comic books are a very solitary art to begin with. A
Yeah.
lot of times sitting at a table by yourself when you don't have a collaborator, it gets a little bit more solitary. So there's that side too. It's definitely not without its benefits, but it's also not without its detractions as well.
So I've had people who are a one man or one woman show when it comes to the comics, and I'm fascinated by the process. So for you, what's your process? Do you script it out first? Is the
Yes,
images
yeah,
come
absolutely.
first?
Yeah, I will sometimes like right now. I'm probably about 50% done with the current book. It's on the way. It's being cleaned up, but it's mostly done. The script is completely done. All the thumbnails are done. Backgrounds are done, but the artwork is still being worked on. And even now, I'm already scripting some ideas for the next issue and writing
Oh,
down
wow.
some panels and some art for the next issue, very loosely because I'm the person that I'll have that great idea and I'll forget it if I don't write it down. So
Yeah.
I'm putting a lot of things down on index cards and post-it notes all over my office. But for me, the way it works is I start with a very loose plot, essentially, and I figure out the number of pages I want to tell the story. And then I list the important beats that need to happen on each page. That allows me to make sure I'm telling the story properly, and it also allows me to make sure that I have the right beats falling at the right parts of the story to kind of inspire the reader to turn the page. So if there's, an accident on Renegades, there's a scene where there's a massive explosion. Well, if that explosion comes on the beginning of a page, it's not going to inspire you to turn the page because you already know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
So I had to make sure it falls on a certain spot where the reader wants to turn the page to find out what happens. So the plotting kind of works into that. And it's very loose. It'll say page one, a spaceship crashes into a building and, we see, people screaming. And then I'll worry about the words and the panels and everything later. But that
Later
that
on, yeah,
allows me
yeah.
to hit everything on the pages. after that, I'll start to go through and I'll start to figure out the panels and the dialogue and start to thumbnail it out. And that process continues to be refined as I go through it. Again, the benefit of being then the artist is I know if a character is going to be injured or something's going to happen later on, that I need to make sure I incorporate that consistently throughout the pages. I know that because I'm scripting it out. So I leave little margin notes like, make sure you sneak this in here and put an Easter egg in there, which I wouldn't necessarily know to do if I wasn't the same person conceiving the ideas. So it does make things a little bit easier to stay consistent on that, because again, it's all just coming from one source. But that step is almost kind of like a loop. Like I continue to go back to the beginning of refining the thumbnails and moving panels around and making sure that things work better. And everything that I'm trying to do is in service to telling the story. So as long as I can do that to the best of my ability, then I'm comfortable moving on. And I do think, despite being critical, I've really kind of hit the mark on this book, a decent number. It's not common that I look at something, I'm like, wow, damn, like this is what I wanted it to look like. And it's happening a couple times in this book already. And I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign, but it's not necessarily what I'm used to.
We're going to take it as a good sign. We'll take it as a good sign.
Definitely take it as a good sign. Absolutely.
We'll take it as a good sign.
Listen to the woman. She's right. Take it as a good sign.
You heard that. You heard it. So you said you have beta readers. Did you find people that are going to be like honest and not sugarcoat it for you?
I think so. These are people that I've connected with through social media, a couple of people that I know. It's not family and friends.
I was just going to say outside of family.
I love my family and friends, but their greatest strength is that they're incredibly supportive. The greatest weakness is that they're incredibly supportive. And I don't know that they'll necessarily tell you. So, I have found some other professionals who I have heard be brutally honest with people before. And I feel like, and in fairness, I've offered them some very constructive criticisms as well. I think it would be useful. They've offered their services. I trust their instincts. We are peers, not competitors. So I'm confident that they'll tell me something that, again, will help to make the book better.
Yeah, that's exciting. To me, that's important because family will sugarcoat and be like, no, this is perfect. And then you send it out and people are like, what were you thinking? Like right here, like, what were you thinking? So finding people that and especially people that you trust as well in their style and in their industry and field and stuff like that is important, especially for you to grow. Because for me, I feel personally that I'm not an artist at all. Like I could draw you some great stick figures and that's about it. But I have a lot of artists, friends and people that I know, and it's an ever changing, ever growing, ever learning thing, just like writing is. Which came first for you? Were you an artist first or writer first?
That's a question a lot of people ask, and I really don't know for sure, but I would think that just based on development, I probably drew before I wrote. Probably, I don't recall the exact year that I really got into comic books, but actually just a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking a lot about it, and I'm pretty sure I remember the first comic that I remember reading. Definitely maybe not the first one I read, but the first one I have a clear recollection of reading. And I bought it, I went online. It's not very expensive. It's not a huge book. It's just an old book. And I bought it and I framed it. I'm going to hang it up in my office because it is kind of instrumental to my development. But I would say I probably enjoy drawing more, but might be better at writing, only because I feel like drawing is something, although you're always refining your skills as a writer, I feel like drawing, maybe because it's more of a motor skill, requires a different level of refinement, I guess. Does not take anything away from writing. Writing is not easy. I struggle with, telling a good story as much as I struggle with, artistically representing a good story. But I think for me personally, just in my own skill set, while I enjoy drawing more, it's much more meditative. I like to have something at the end that is tangible. I might be stronger, at the very least quicker, in being able to produce strong writing as compared to strong art.
Okay. Yeah. So because I always admire people that can do both. And I'm like, I can't even begin to tell you like what, like, I tell people I'm not an artist. I just know what I like and I can draw some stick figures. Like if that's what you need from me, I got you. But
that's how I feel about musicians. I watch people just pick up an instrument and play. I can't sing. I can't play an instrument. It's a skill I will never have. And I'm just awe-inspired by people who can do that. It blows my mind.
Same. For me, it's the drummers. Like I watch drummers and I'm like, I want to do that. And then like, put some drumsticks in my hands and
Yeah.
it's like,
Oh, it's a mess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely.
Definitely is. So, do you already know if this is going to be a series, a one shot? What are your goals for it? I like exclusives here at the
Yes, no.
Late Night
So
Nerd
my
Show.
goal is to make this an ongoing. Right now, I have about 4 story arcs kind of mapped out. Each story arc is designed to sort of focus more on one of the 4 main characters, to give a little bit of backstory, a little bit of feedback on how they got to the point that they're at. Not all of these characters, in fact, none of these characters are heroic in the typical sense of the word. They're all flawed, and how they got to the points that they're flawed, how they overcame whatever flaws they may have. Each character is designed to get about 1 story arc and about a 4 story arc map. One of the things that I like about manga is that it typically tends to be finite.
Mhm.
Is the mangaka, the person creating it, has a definitive start and end point. The end point with something like One Piece could go on 20 years, but
Mhm.
that manga is designed to end, and it will end eventually. Once that individual tells the story, for lack of a better word, that story is closed.
Mhm.
You compare that to something like Superman or Spider-Man, that's been going for 60, 80
Oh,
years in some
yep.
cases. They've been going on for a very long time because the stories just get picked up by new creative teams, and that's great. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to run Accidental Renegades for 100 years. I'm
Mhm.
trying to tell a strong story with a beginning and an end point, and the end point will eventually end. I mean, they're a group of people who accidentally ignite a global revolution. At some point, that revolution is going to happen,
Yeah.
and that revolution is going to have consequences. So in order to get to that story, there's a path that I intend to take.
You mentioned One Piece, and if I remember the blurb correctly, it's like Kurt meets One Piece, raised by Quentin Tarantino. Help me
Yeah, it's
with this
basically
quote.
the blurb that I was using for a while is that this book is basically the bastard love child of Kurt Vonnegut and One Piece, raised by Quentin Tarantino. Because the story, it's irreverent, it's kind of dystopian, but at the same time, it's also a little bit gory. It's a little bit over the top. So it definitely has manga influences. It is PG-13, so
Okay.
it's not it's not for little kids, but
Mhm.
it's also not going to get banned in public libraries. But it does have gore, it does have violence, it does have profanity. At least the edited out versions of those words, because these are serious adults doing serious things, and they're
Mhm.
not angels. And one thing that I know, and I'm sure your husband knows as well, is people in the military, um, you know, tend to be a little bit frank with what they have to say, and sometimes they say that in ways that is a little bit blunt. And one of the
Mhm.
characters in the
Mhm.
book is a veteran of a previous Civil War. So
Oh,
he
okay.
is not he's not one to mince words, and a lot of the characters are like that. So it puts a sense of urgency in it when heck is replaced by something more profane, and that's kind of what the book does to some degree. So it's definitely not for little kids.
Mhm.
I would rate it PG-13, and it's probably definitely safe in that window.
Oh, that's actually good to know. That's the first time we've ever had somebody rate their comic. They're usually
Yeah,
like,
well, the
"Yeah."
part of the problem I think with crowdfunding is you don't know who necessarily all of your backers are personally. I mean, I do know some of them, but I don't know all of them. And I don't know if someone's like, oh, my kid loves, Star
Yeah.
Wars. My kid loves Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm going to buy him or her this book. And then you open up, and literally on like the first 4 pages, there's, a guy in, bondage gear, and, a person getting their head ripped off. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that does or does
Yeah,
not
yeah,
happen in the book.
but,
I'm just saying if
no.
it were to happen, I feel
Mhm.
like people should know. I mean, I don't have a huge legal team to protect me if someone to complain about something in
It
the book that's
does.
more violent than they thought it would be.
Yeah. No, and no, and I appreciate that because, but I think most of the times, 9 times out of 10, they're usually like, "No, this is adult only," and we
Right,
we know
right.
that, but I like that the fact that you put, like, PG-13, like, that's what we're going for, so it's
Yeah, it's
actually
like those parents who brought their little kids to see Deadpool and were like, "I didn't think it was going to be like this." Like, yeah, we probably should have paid
good.
a little bit more attention to what was on the cover.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Yes. I was at a theater when, and this mom had, like, 3 kids with her, and she was like, "I don't have enough hands for all their ears." I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, the exit's, like, right there. She's
That's
like,
yeah. That feels like a waste of money at that point.
yeah. Yeah, 'cause 3 kids, each of them popcorn, like, it's not, no.
It's
Um,
not cheap, no.
no, it's not. So you have these 4 characters, um are any of them somewhat like you? Is any of you in these characters?
I think a little bit of me is personality wise is in each of the characters, and I kind of use the inside out methodology where like each character represents a different part of that that individual psyche.
Mm.
So, one thing that I try to do, especially in dealing with the team book, is have a way of identifying each character as being unique. And it's more than just, this is the funny one, this is the angry one, this is the mean one. I feel like that's a little bit too shallow.
Mhm.
What I've kind of learned to do for each character is to come up with a one sentence philosophy that sort of encapsulates what that character is about.
Oh.
And whatever that character does should try to tie back to that philosophy. And just to give you an example, if you have a character, like Kingpin, I want to make money. I want to be the crime boss of New York.
Mhm.
Okay. Everything that character does then ties back to that philosophy. So whatever that character does is driven by that motivation. So it makes it a little bit easier to understand where I think that character is coming from,
Oh, I
especially if
like
you're not
that.
familiar with it. So what I did with these characters, each one has like a philosophy, and whatever that character does, it ties back to that philosophy. And I don't want to give away too much, but if a
Mhm.
character's philosophy
Mhm.
is, I want to be left alone. I just want to live my life. I've been through a lot. I don't want to do this crap anymore. Just leave me alone. Everything that motivates that character's goal is to just be able to do enough to live quietly. So you can kind of relate to that character if you know what drives them. So
Yeah, I like
that's one
that.
thing. Yeah, and it worked for me, and that's something that I've kind of learned with team books is the hard part of a team book. I think the hard part with an individual book is to not make that character exactly like the writer.
Mhm.
The Mary Sue and whatever else you want to call it, where that character is just a reflection of the writer, and
Yeah.
that character's a reflection of everything that writer wants to be. So
Mhm.
that's a challenge with individual books. I think what challenge with team books is to make each character stand out on their own, because if you've ever been in a room with five people, there are five completely different personalities at play.
Mhm.
So it's a challenge in a team book to do that. So I kind of came up with a way to map that out. And the other thing that I try to do is shorthand where the way the characters speak, because not everyone speaks the same way. So it'll say, this character, very short tempered, very rude, curses a lot. This character, speaks in long sentences. This character uses a lot of alliteration. This character is always trying to be funny, because the speech patterns that people have are all unique to them. And
Mhm.
the good authors, you can almost tell who's talking without the speech bubbles because of the way they're talking.
That's right. Yeah,
And
that's true.
that's like more graduate level stuff, and it's very hard to get to, but it's something I've been trying to work through, especially on this book, because there are really four main characters, and then a fifth character that kind of comes in later. Is how do you make those characters stand out to someone? And again, this is not the X-Men. Nobody knows who these characters are, so they have to
Mhm.
stand out and be unique fairly early on in the story. So
Yeah, they have to be
that those are,
memorable.
yeah, they have to be memorable, and they have to be memorable by being unique. So I can't have a team of five of the exact same person, and no one's going to be that interested, because if you have five of the exact same person, you don't really need four of them.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to make that a team book that is unique, and also by having it diverse, it's a good way to have the reader be able to relate to someone in that book.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell kind of a short story on this. I do this comics is like a passion and a hobby, but I'm a high school teacher, and I'm a high school teacher in the district that is almost 100% Hispanic and Black students. And I've been there for a little over half a decade now, and I've gotten to know many of the students very, very well. And when Black Panther came out, we actually had like a field trip where the school, for lack of a better word, like took part of the day and took a bunch of students to go see Black Panther.
Oh.
And I remember being fairly new to the school district and being like, well, that seems kind of odd to take high school students to see a movie, but whatever, it's what we want to do. That's cool. And I remember the students coming back, and particularly the Black students, who were like, I never thought I would see a movie where like a major superhero look like me, that I can relate to, that I can be like, wow,
Yeah.
look at that. Like, look at him and look at her, look at them out there. It's amazing. And it kind of gave me pause, because I always understood the importance of representation, but I never saw it in play firsthand through the eyes of someone else. And it kind of was like, it is important to have characters that anyone can relate to. So
Yeah.
when I was designing the characters, and probably went through about 5 different iterations before I got to where they ended up, each character looks a little bit different, and none of the main characters look like me, just because I kind of felt like it was boring. But also, I wanted these students and kids like them to be able to look and say, oh, that character kind of looks like I look.
Mhm.
That character looks like someone I know. That character could be someone in my community. I think it's better to tell the story, and I think it's better for them to see. In fact, I've kind of joked the only character that looks anything like me is probably the villain. Just not by any, I mean, not looks like me, but at least, is closest to the way I look, just happens to be the villain. And he's a pretty cool villain. And I love to be able to tell his stories,
Mhm.
but it's just funny that it's just how it all kind of ended up at the end. So I do think it's very, very important. And there's forcing it into the story, and then there's a way for it to be the right way to tell a story. And I
Mhm.
think that's the mark that we hit here.
Yeah, and I for one appreciate that because you said you were a child of the 80s and 90s as was I, and for the longest it was Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, the only person I had to look at,
Yeah,
and then they started doing the Batman 1977 reruns, and
yeah,
Eartha Kitt was
yep,
Catwoman, but she was Catwoman, you know what I mean? She
yeah,
wasn't necessarily a hero per se,
right,
and then it wasn't until probably early in my teens that I found an X-Men comic with Storm on the front, and I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh shit, like there
yeah,
really is like,
yeah.
somebody that somewhat looks like me." So,
I think there's ways to tell the story poorly, and I think that's what a lot of people get frustrated with. But I also think a story needs to be told. It needs to be
mm,
told well. I think it's more than worth its weight if it's done correctly. And like you said, I mean, the personal impact that made on you probably can't be overstated.
mm-mm. No, because I have a shrine to Storm. I mean, I also have one for Catwoman too,
Yeah.
but I have a shrine for Storm. No, and it is much appreciated because I'm not everybody knows I'm not a liar because I have no poker face. But when I first saw the cover, I was like, who is doing this? I didn't know what you looked like, you know what I mean? So I was like, who is doing
Yeah.
this? I like where this is going, you know what I mean? I was definitely surprised. And so the fact that it's somewhat of an ode to your students as well, like that means a lot. That says a lot about you as a teacher. Do your students know that you write comics
They do.
and
Yeah,
draw?
they do. And in fact, a few of them saw the free comic book day issue, and a few of them have been kind of harassing me, like, "Hey, when are we going to see more of this? What are you doing with this?" It's the summertime now, so I don't have to worry about being, accosted by them. But probably by the time we get back, the book should pretty much be printed. So we'll see if the word gets out. Yeah, I mean, I had a few fans and a few kids that kind of help spread the word. Um, and it's funny, a couple kids who had the book and didn't know I did it. And I'm like, you see the name on the front cover, right? Like, did you read it? There's only one of me in this entire building, so
That's
it's not a
awesome
common name.
though.
Yeah, yeah, it's been interesting, and it does kind of help to keep things a little bit more in touch with reality right now, because I'm not a young person anymore. So being able to understand what's important, a lot of those students are really into manga, so we'll talk about those things, and they'll talk about what they like and don't like, and it helps to make sure that I kind of stay fresh.
I was getting ready to ask if you've ever asked them their opinions and their thoughts, in terms of like, what they like and what they don't like, and how did you incorporate that into your work if you did?
Really, we talk a little bit, and they'll a lot of times, once they kind of know that you know you're into comics or you're into manga, they'll come and they'll talk to you about it and ask you questions about it and ask you if you've seen this or read this. And a lot of them are definitely into anime more than manga. A lot of them like to watch it.
Mhm.
A lot of them do still read it, but I tend to find that most of my students are like, "Have you seen this? Are you watching this episode? Did you watch
Yeah.
this?" And to be completely honest, I'm not watching as much as I'm reading, just
Oh, okay.
because creating a book is a lot of takes a lot of time, and I find it's a little bit easier to flip through a manga than it is to sit and watch
Mhm.
30 to 45 minutes of a show. Part of the problem is, if the show's really good, you don't want to just do one episode. So
Oh,
one
no.
episode turns into two or three, and now you've eaten
Yeah.
up a lot of time.
I've
So a
lived
lot of
that life, so
yeah,
yes,
oh
I
yeah,
know.
yeah. A lot of students, oh, did you see Attack on Titan? I'm like, I haven't even watched the season yet, man. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I
Yeah.
haven't gotten to it. But they do talk, and they do offer some insight and things that they like and don't like, and it's been pretty helpful, because again, it's a different perspective on things, and I tend to look at things from my very narrow viewpoint, but being able to open that up and see it from different eyes, it only helps.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I do
Yeah.
like that you kinda you're the second teacher I've had here,
Oh,
I just find that fascinating, you're able to have, like, your own little source, guide right at school, like, during the
right.
break, like, "Hey, pop quiz. What did
Yeah.
you like about my book?" Like
I really ask them for a lot of help, particularly with regards to things on social media. Like, should I post this? When should I post this? How should I post this? Should I open up this type of account? And they are so much savvier and so much wiser about that than I am. And they'll
Yeah.
offer feedback like, well, you don't need this, but you definitely need this, and you should do this, and make sure you post this, and I'll share it. And it's stuff that it only helps to have experts in fields that I'm not strong at. So when it comes to social media, I consider myself smart on it, but definitely not the smartest person. So having students that know much more than me is
Yeah,
hugely beneficial.
definitely helps. And kind of helps them too because they can go into like social media
Yeah.
marketing and social media
Oh yeah.
managing and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a win-win for
Yeah.
both of you.
And some of these kids are so bright and they're so savvy about it. It just, it's really helpful, really, and really kind of impressive.
That's so cool. And you said your family is supportive as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
How did you tell them and they were like, "What the heck?" And then they saw your stuff and they're like, "Oh, okay, no, this is good."
Okay, so the running joke is that I've been saying I'm going to make a comic book for about my entire life, and when I finally did it, I think my kids are like, "Wow, you've been talking about this for so long. I didn't think you were going to do it." The
Oh,
pandemic definitely helped. Having you know being kind of forced to stay in a little bit
mhm,
helped. Trying to find something to maintain my sanity helped. I was always working traditional with just pen and paper and ink. Um, and then I made the transition over to digital, and I
ooh,
purchased the tablet, and I purchased the software, and start to learn that a little bit. I find that helps me personally because it plays to the areas that I'm, let's just say I'm, maybe a little weaker.
mhm,
So I tend to be a big time eraser. I'll draw on a race and I'll draw on a race and I'll draw on a race. That can start to take a toll on a piece of paper, but
mhm,
digitally I can erase a million times. It's not going to change the quality of the picture. So it allows me to be a little bit more, I don't know, I guess experimental when I'm working, and that tends to help me out. It is a drawback when you're working, I think, traditional,
mhm,
but it doesn't slow me down working physical or working digital. So that's been really, really helpful. I think that's helped out a lot. And that kind of motivated me to be a little bit quicker and helped me to get a book out. They were super supportive. In fact, on Free Comic Book Day, they came with me and helped me deliver the
oh,
books and took some pictures and sharing on social media, like, hey,
that's
look what
cool.
look what we did. Um, Sharing it with their friends and everything else. So they've been super supportive. I'm sure they'll see this. I don't know if they necessarily understand it, but they're super supportive. Like, I
That's
feel
the
like it's one of
important
those,
part,
like, I don't get why he's doing this, but I love the fact that he's doing it, I
doing it.
guess. And that's fine. There's a tremendous amount of respect, and a lot of support because, like I said, it is a solitary thing, and it
Mhm,
takes you away from people you care about because you're sitting at a desk all day. And to
yeah.
have family members that support that and are 100% on board with it, I couldn't, I mean, literally couldn't have done any of this without him. So it's
Aw,
been
shout out to
very
the
fortunate. Yeah,
fam, let's
absolutely,
go.
absolutely.
I love that. I love to hear, supportive families because
Yeah,
it always breaks my heart when they're like, "No, I got no one." I'm like, "Oh, you got me. I'm your family now." Like, you know what I mean? So I'm always cheerful when to hear that family has your
yeah.
back 100%, even if they don't understand. They don't have to
Oh,
understand, but
absolutely.
they
They don't
got
have to
that.
understand it,
So
but I think that's something that I'm sure you kind of see this, in your field as well. Is there's a whole community of people that are out there to support you that I've only really started to tap into over the past year or so. And like I said, they've been, for the most part, 100%. I mean, I know there's obviously, bad factions out there, but I
mhm.
have not really run afoul of any of those. I've seen them out there, but
Yeah.
I don't cross into that neighborhood. I don't have any business for it. But for the most part, everyone I've dealt with has been 100% supportive, and they've been positive and competitive, but professional about it. And
Mhm, mhm.
that's been something that if I would have known it was going to be like that, I would have entered it much, much sooner.
Yeah.
I don't know what I thought. Maybe it's my cynicism at play, but I was immediately impressed by how receptive everyone was and how willing they were to offer help and support to a relative stranger. And
Mhm.
it's been very inspirational so far. And
Yeah,
I'm sure you see it too.
yeah, yeah. I was just
In
gonna say it is
podcasting and
competitive,
anything.
but it's
Yeah,
like a healthy
yeah,
competition. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
you want to do better, but you also want the person next to you to do better. And like if you get a step up, that you see that somebody's reaching down the hand to help you up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely something you want to pay forward when you get the chance as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, you said you just started like a year ago. Wait
Mhm.
till you hit 2 years into it. You're gonna be like, what? Like it's so mind blowing. And I think the thing that I like the most is the friendship networking, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
still somewhat business, but you end up being friends. Like, that's the part that has always blown me away, where it's like, "Hey, do you know so and so? Like, they do comics too." And next thing you know, they're introducing you and stuff like
yeah.
that, and it spreads like wildfire
Yeah,
fire, and I
yeah, it's
love
true.
that.
I'm seeing that a little bit. It's actually funny. I was at a very a small local convention a few weeks ago, and I just went as a fan. I wasn't at a table or anything like that. But I was like, you know what? I want to go and I want to kind of check it out. And while I was there, I noticed there was an artist alley table from someone that I'm, social media friends with. And I actually waited in line. I bought the book, and I was like, I just want to say, hey, we follow each other on Twitter. I'm Zed Comics Original. Like, oh, hey, how's it going? And it was like really weird for a second to see someone you've only seen online actually in person in the flesh. So we talked for a few minutes, and I didn't want to, get in the way of other customers. So I didn't want to linger for too long, but
Mhm.
it was really interesting to be like, hey, it's great to actually see a human being like in public out of captivity and be able to actually talk to them. So it takes a little getting used to, I think, but
Mhm.
it's been really enjoyable.
I'm good. I'm so glad. I love that you said out of captivity. Out of
Yeah,
captivity. I
that's
think
that's
that's
the best way to put it.
I'm
Like out in
cracking
the
up.
wild, they were
I'm
they
gonna
were released from captivity
I'm
for a
gonna
little while.
steal that
Yeah,
from you. So
absolutely, it's
now
all
when I go
yours.
to
Go
cons,
ahead.
I'm like, "Oh my god,
Yeah,
feel free."
yeah, take it. It's all yours. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm totally gonna use that from now on. So the Kickstarter is live. How many
Yep.
more days do we have?
So I actually, because it's my first Kickstarter, I ran it for a 60-day Kickstarter,
Okay,
and a few
sweet.
people I talked to said, there's pros and cons of doing it that way, but it's like I said, I've done books before, but it's the first book I've crowdfunded. I'm the type of person that I tend to make a lot of stumbles early on,
Mhm.
and then I learned from it the second time. And I figured if I'm going to do things wrong on this Kickstarter, maybe not get the word out, maybe not spread the word the right way. I don't know. I want to be able to have enough time for people to get the word. So it's a 60-day Kickstarter. Depending on how
Okay.
this one goes, the next one will be shorter, probably a little bit more urgency in it. But first Kickstarter, I wanted to make it manageable, but I also wanted to give myself enough time to figure it all out. And the first day so far, I haven't checked it in a couple hours, but it's been, pretty successful actually for a
Good.
first day, first Kickstarter. So I'm looking forward to that continuing and hopefully building on the momentum and really driving this thing, as far as it can go.
Perfect. I like that it's a learning process. I
Yeah.
am all for that because if you go into it thinking that you know everything, you're not going to learn anything and you're probably going to fail and not continue on, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I know that you've got success all in front of you because you're taking it as what it is. It's a learning journey and hopefully this 60-day Kickstarter will be, super successful and we'll all have books in our hands.
I
So
hope
I'm
so.
super
The more the
excited.
merrier.
Yeah, I'm super
Anyone
excited
wants one,
for
I'd
you.
love to give them one. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go for it. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of
All
our
right.
interview, but if there's any parting words, anything you want to say other than go get the Kickstarter, don't be a loser.
Well, yeah. I mean, go get the Kickstarter. Don't be a loser. Come on now. It's on Kickstarter as of today under Accidental Renegades, and I'll send the link so you can have that as well. The social medias are Instagram and Facebook at Zed Comics Original. That's ZED Comics Original. It's on Twitter at Z, the letter Z Comics Original. The website is zcomicsoriginal.com. Feel free to check any of those out. If you see
Sure.
anything you like, make sure you pick up the book, send me a note, give a follow, and I'll be more than happy to support you and do whatever I can to help you be as successful as you can be as well. So
Yay.
thank you. This has been awesome.
Oh,
Great opportunity.
I'm so glad you had fun. I'm so glad. If you don't mind sticking around real quick, let me just
Sure.
shut this down and we can talk afterwards.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Oh my gosh, I'm going hoarse. Excuse me. I had so much
No
fun
problem.
talking to Jeff. Guys, the links are in the description. As always, I don't put people on here that I don't support myself. So go ahead, get the Kickstarter, go pledge. It doesn't take a lot. Or if you want to give a lot, you could be a superhero too. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. So go follow Jeff, go follow Zed Comics, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.